Hello, I'm Jorge Varela from thebuttonsmashers.com, and here's my video review of Mutant Mud's Super Challenge for a hell of a lot of platforms. I think, like Wii U, 3DS, PS Vita, PS4, PC, yeah, man, look it up, there's a ton. But anyway, here's my short version of the review. It's really good, but it's really hard, basically. That's all I can say. I do suggest that you all go play the original Mutant Muds before getting into this one, because this game is absolutely relentless in its difficulty. Like, it's really, really hard, harder than the previous one. So if you guys like to play really hard platforming games like Super Meat Boy, I Wanna Be the Guy, and whatever, then go ahead, but I highly recommend that you play the predecessor first, since those are way easier by comparison, and they will make for a smoother transition going into Super Challenge. Alright? Cool. Well, if you want to know more about the greater details about the game, then I suggest you stick around for the long version, which goes as follows. Sometimes I truly feel that Mutant Mudds is like some sort of Super Nintendo game that got lost in some sort of time vortex and somehow got released in 2013, with a brand new sequel coming out now in 2016. I wish to say that with the most positive connotation possible, since I like those games a lot, despite how incredibly hard they can get at times. And within its colorful and friendly exterior, there is a brutal 2D platformer waiting to test you on your skills, and it does a pretty great job at that. Mutant Mudds Super Challenge is a sequel to the original Mutant Mudds, where the simple story, the aesthetic, the enemies, the upgrades, and the environments are pretty much identical to the previous game. However, the actual level design and mechanics are much more difficult than before, truly pushing Mutant Mudds veterans to their limit one spiky pit at a time. Playing the game is fairly simple. You move with the D-pad, you shoot your water gun, you jump, and you use your little jetpack thing to hover around for a little bit, and that's pretty much all you need to know in terms of the controls. There are some upgrades you get, such as having a stronger weapon or being able to float for a longer amount of time, but in general, the entire game is focused around how good you are at platforming, moving around, jumping, dodging, shooting monsters, and whatever. It is expected out of many platformers to have good control feel, and this game really does deliver. So playing the game feels tight and responsive, and it never feels like it's the game screwing up whenever I get killed. It is always my fault because I never do a good job. Everything is super duper responsive. When you move left, it goes left. When you go right, it goes right at that very moment. There's no delay or anything, so if I ever die, it's because it's my fault, because the game is giving me everything that I need to survive. Just like in the previous game, the controls work just fine, and you will never have a problem when you're playing. Clearly, it is not the most complex game in the world, but that ends up working in its favor. The game is set up to take you straight to the action as soon as possible, but still allowing you to beat whatever levels you want at your own pace. Very similar to the first game, you begin in a hub area, where you are allowed to choose which world and what level within it you want to play, rather than most games that will tend to feed you levels through a linear path. Think, Mega Man and how you can choose your robot masters in whatever order you want, but with mud monsters instead of robots. I personally think that this feature is great, since there have been many times that I've gotten tired of dying in the same parts of a level over and over again, that being able to easily exit and choose another level was a breath of fresh air that prevented me from putting the game down out of frustration. Instead of just saying, man, this is way too hard, and just put the game down and not play it, I can be like, okay, well, I'll just quit and I'll try something else, kind of as a little break. And as soon as I beat that one, or, as soon as I get a feel for all these new mechanics or these new enemies, I can go back, try it again, and usually I end up succeeding. Speaking of frustrations though, the game now has an integrated death counter, which is a fun little stat that clearly communicates what kind of game we're dealing with, a pretty hard one. This counter can be seen after you die, and you can get a little screen that asks you if you wish to retry or quit, which I'm not super fond of, honestly, since it gives me time to stop and think about maybe giving up, when I think it would have been better to just immediately keep playing after a death, with the death counter showing in the corner or something like that. If there is any moment that I want to quit, then I will pause the game and do so. There is absolutely no need for the game to constantly keep asking me if I want to try again every single time I die, for I think it completely breaks the flow of the game for me. Could you imagine if Super Meat Boy had the same menu pop up every single time you die? And believe me, you die a ton in Super Meat Boy very quickly. Could you imagine if you just fade out and then have it ask you and you press retry and then it fades back in again? It would be kind of slow and it'd be pretty frustrating. So just try and visualize that and you'll see what I mean. But, the point I'm trying to make is that the game, even though it already does a pretty good job at bringing you into the action fast, I feel like it could still do an even better job than now. They could still, fix a few kinks here and there to make a better flowing experience. However, this complaint is merely myself really reaching for something to give constructive criticism on, since I'm having a pretty tough time pointing out anything that's inherently kind of wrong about the game. I guess it's a little disappointing that most of the environments are the same as the last game, but really that didn't bother me all that much, if at all. I've also been constantly mentioning the difficulty and how much I'm agonizing about it or whatever, but I've actually been having a blast. Like, you know, this is a really hard game, but this is really, really fun. Not only is it fun to beat the levels, but it is also equally as fun to replay them in order to collect medals that are scattered around and hidden all over the place. There are also some extra hidden levels within those levels that you're at. And so, of course, you guessed it, those levels are way more difficult than the actual main levels, or, you know, at least at the same level. These are also really fun, but require a good degree of patience if you want to find all the medals and make it out alive. There are also some boss battles in the game, but they're very difficult to get to since you have to literally complete everything that you could ever find in those levels in one world to be able to have access to them. And so when you get there, the bosses feel more like puzzles than actual fights. You're not there just shooting constantly. It feels more like when you're fighting someone in Dark Souls, you know? Like, you don't actually charge at the enemy and just shoot them until they fall over, but rather, there's a certain timing and there's a certain amount of waiting that you need to have in order to be able to defeat them efficiently. Technically, you could beat some of them by just, you know, rapid firing all the time, but it's gonna be way more difficult than just actually waiting and, you know, stopping to think, okay, this is the part where I shoot, this is the part where I run away, this is the part where I jump. And so aside from that, there really isn't much else to say about the game, other than the fact that it's still just as good as the previous one. If you were already a fan of Mutant Muds, then I can assure you that you will have a lot of fun with this new installment as well. However, for any newcomers out there, this might be a little bit much. So in this case, I suggest that these people go play the original Mutant Muds, get a feel for the controls, get a feel for the enemies and the difficulty curve and all that, and after that, you're more than ready to take a deep dive into Super Challenge, since the game goes into it assuming that you've seen the song and dance before. In terms of platform, I highly recommend that you get this either on the 3DS or on the PlayStation Vita. I played the Vita version for this review, and it proved to be a really fast, really fun experience that was really easy to just pick up and play. Just, you know, pick it up, play a level for like 10 or 15 minutes, put it down, and just go back to it later. It's very accessible in that aspect. And on top of that, the PlayStation Vita version has cross-buy, so if you purchase either the Vita version or the PS4 version, you're gonna get a copy for both, so it's a tough deal to reject. Either way, it's still the same old Mutant Muds as always, and I could not ask for anything more. I recommend it. Go get it. Thank you very much for watching. If you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to give this video a like, and of course you can go to our website, thebuttonsmasher.com. We do news, we do reviews, and if you're a fan of podcasts, then be sure to visit that site because we have a lot of them. All of that content is created by really fun people that love what they do, so we highly appreciate your support.